In the CFT model, there are 5 pathways to alignment. The pathways are what make the CFT coaching model work. I'm going to repeat that. The pathways are what make the CFT coaching model work. This class will provide an overview of all 5 pathways, and it will also suggest when to use the pathways. I'm going to talk a lot, and I'm going to go slowly so you can take notes. And I'm going to offer lots of opportunities for you to ask me questions, because that makes it more interesting. So I want to begin the content portion, which is virtually the whole of this class, by talking about the arc of the coaching session. So a coaching session has 3 parts, like a good story. It's got a beginning, a big middle, and an ending. The beginning is when you connect and contract. 2 C words. It's when you connect and contract. So when we begin a session, we connect verbally, but also energetically with our clients. It's an opportunity to let your 2 hearts do what they naturally want to do, which is to open to each other. And the other thing we do in the beginning is we contract with our clients. In other words, we agree on the focus of the session. That is the agenda. So the beginning is connect and contract. The big middle is choose and follow. Choose and follow a pathway. You, the coach, are in charge of holding the focus and the structure of the session. You do this by choosing one of the 5 pathways and following that pathway until there is a shift. So the middle is choose and follow a pathway. The ending is deepen and design. You close the session by helping your client deepen their awareness and/or design an action that addresses their agenda. So the ending is deepen and design. Our focus in this class is on the big middle, choosing and following a pathway to the alignment with self. So I'm going to just pause for a moment, see if there are any questions so far. Okay, there's going to be plenty of time for questions. What are the pathways? In the CFT model, there are 5 pathways to alignment with self. And each pathway is a discrete strategy or process for moving beyond limiting beliefs and connecting to self with a capital S. So I'm going to repeat that. Each pathway is a discrete, that is a distinct strategy or process for moving beyond limiting beliefs and connecting to self. That wise, loving, and creative core of every human being, including you and every one of your possible clients. Think of the pathways as different rivers that lead to the same ocean, the ocean of self. Self with a capital S. So, what is this self? Self is the divine indwelling. And if that's a phrase that you don't care for, just toss it aside. Another way of saying it is that it is our essence. It is the core of every human being. Every human being. And this core, I like to say, is characterized by 4 words that begin with the letter I. So this core is indestructible. That is, it cannot be destroyed, injured, damaged, or hurt. It is indestructible. It is also intact. It is whole, complete. Nothing is missing. It is intact. It is also intelligent. In other words, it holds innate or intrinsic wisdom. It has deep knowing. It is creative. It is intelligent. And finally, it is immaculate. That is, it is without blemish, stain, or sin. It is pure. It is pristine. It is immaculate. Self is our essence. So we all have lots of parts. We have critical parts, caretaking parts, pleasing parts, perfectionist parts, party parts, wounded children parts. We all have lots of parts. If we got all our parts to step back, what remains is self. And self is not a part. It is our parts that carry all our wounds and limiting beliefs. So all that sense of unworthiness, unlovability, or incompetence that may get triggered in you from time to time, I know it gets triggered in me, those are parts. That is not self. Self is unwounded and unlimited. Self is unwounded and unlimited. It is our parts that carry the limiting beliefs and the wounding. Self is the seat of awareness. Self is the seat of awareness which can see, hold, and understand the parts of us that are scared, hurt, angry, sad, ashamed, or anything else that causes us distress. Self is known to all the great religious and spiritual traditions. It is variously called Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, Atman, the Tao, soul, the image of God, the divine spark. It's what the Buddhists also call no self. It has many names. But what's key is to remember is that self is whole, wise, loving, and good. I'm sure you have your favorite people in history or even in contemporary times who are not good. But they have self, and their self is whole, wise, loving, and good. This is true even in people who have suffered severe trauma, even in people whose actions make them appear evil. They are acting from parts, not from self. The nature of self is captured by 8 words beginning with the letter C. And I'm going to make sure that you have time to write all 8 down because they're keys both to your client as well as to your own state of being. So, self is characterized by calmness, peace, and clarity. Self has clarity. Self is also characterized by curiosity, and compassion. Curiosity, no judgment. Oh, I wonder what's going on over there. Oh, I wonder what that behavior is really about. And compassion, that's opening your heart to another's distress and being with them in that distress. It's not about taking it on yourself, but it's being a loving companion in the midst of their distress. So you can see how those two words, curiosity and compassion, really sum up the come from place for us coaches. We want to come from those two places, curiosity and compassion. Self is also characterized by confidence and courage. Courage is the ability to come from the heart. Coming from the heart, even in the face of distress. And self is also characterized by creativity and connectedness. Self wants to connect. So we've got calmness and clarity, curiosity and compassion, confidence and courage, creativity and connectedness. Self is like the sun. Like the sun, it is sometimes obscured, but it is always there. It is the alive core of every human being, the source of warmth, of light, and of life in the internal system. So the 5 CFT pathways are discrete strategies that help the coach help the client. They help the coach help the client access a critical mass of self. Each pathway is a river that empties into the ocean of self. So we'll take a breath, we'll pause, we'll see if there are any questions. Paulina.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So this is it's more of an existential question, but I'm curious to hear what your 2 cents is.
Okay.
If someone can act from a place of self always.
The way I like to think of it, because we're human beings, the other half of the equation is we're human, therefore wounded, therefore unskillful, therefore needing help.
Mm.
It's like God's plan to employ coaches.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
But what I aspire to do in my life and what I attempt to help others to do is to act from a critical mass of self. So I don't say act from self.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's setting the bar too high. What I've said about self is that it's so powerful that you just need that 1, 2, or 3%, Paulina. Mm-hmm. It's like on a cloudy day, you go outside and then you notice, oh, that cloud is moving. A ray of sunshine is about to come through, and you just lift your face and you receive it. And that one ray makes such a difference. Mm-hmm. It's the same with self. So we might have a coaching session coming up and we feel kind of disgruntled and tired. If we take a moment to center ourselves, send some compassion to the parts of us that are distressed, and open to curiosity, we can bring some of that self into the session. But I would say enlightenment would be having that access on a continuous basis.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for also touching on how to do that for ourselves as coaches before a session. I think that also answers my question too.
Great. Thank you,
Thanks.
Paulina. So I'm gonna continue, and then I'll make room for more questions. So I'm calling this section of my presentation "Pathways are the coach's friends." Pathways help us hold the focus of the session on the client's agenda. They let us as coaches relax once we've learned the pathways. They let us relax because once we've chosen a pathway, we basically know the landmarks, we know the structure of the session now. And whenever the client goes off the pathway, so you're on a pathway, you're on a river, and the client says, wow, look at that town up ahead. Let's dock here and go exploring the town. You can always say, let me interrupt you. Let's go back to the river. And you can bring them back to the pathway. The pathway gives the coach a structure to hold the session, and it provides landmarks along the way. When you only use basic skills without a pathway, there's a tendency to wander all over the landscape, to lose focus, to try to figure things out, to solve the problem, rather than trusting the process. If you trust the process will carry you to self, and the client accessing that very powerful solar energy will then know how to solve their own problems. They'll know how to manage their circumstances. So we don't have to figure it out. So pathways help you coach the client, not the problem. Pathways, I like to say, are the expressways to transformation. Trust them. Ratna Devi.
I have got a question that is related to it, but I'm not sure if it might be a little bit too soon in the process, that you have in your mind. It's basically, I often find, I wish I could relax a little bit more in the way you were saying as a coach and trust the pathway. But where I'm sort of getting sidetracked is like when the client comes up with some resistance, and I'm very compelled to actually go into addressing that resistance, i.e. do some parts work in some kind of way. And then I'm in what I'm always doing, which is parts work.
So I would do exactly what you do, because parts work is perfect for resistance, because whatever is blocking, whatever is in the way is the way with parts work.
Yes.
So I would just shift to parts work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm going to say more about each of the pathways in a moment, Ratna Devi. So if you have a follow-up, please raise your hand again.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So I've been making a case for using the pathways. How do you choose a pathway? Here's the big idea. You can use any pathway for any topic. No matter what the client brings, you can use any pathway. And some pathways lend themselves to some topics better than others. So the theory is you can use any pathway with any topic, and what you'll discover is that some pathways lend themselves to some topics better than others. So to make a choice, you want to use science and art. You want to use your intuition and clues from the client to choose a pathway. The key is to choose one of the 5 pathways. So connect and contract, and then choose one of the 5 pathways. There is no wrong choice. Let me repeat. There is no wrong choice. If you choose a pathway that doesn't work for a client, simply switch. Over time, you will learn which pathways work best for which situations and which clients. You will also learn to blend the pathways. But I want to warn you against blending them as a crutch. You want to learn to exploit the full potential of each pathway. So particularly at the beginning of your coaching journey, once you choose a pathway, unless it leads to an absolute dead end, stick with it, see if you can exploit its full potential so that you can learn its secrets and its power, because they all have power. So I'll pause again, see if there are any questions before I start discussing each of the pathways. Okay. Sam, you have a question? Okay, I'm not seeing Sam, but I'm going to go to Paulina.
Can you, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, okay, just a minute, Paulina. Sam.
Sorry. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about choosing a pathway as the coach in relationship to kind of really letting the client direct. This is always a push-pull that I feel inside myself.
Yeah, so coaching is a client-led process, and the coach is in charge of holding the structure of the session, keeping the focus on the agenda. And so it's kind of a balance. And sometimes it has to be negotiated right in the middle of a session. But one of the things that I do, once I get agreement on the contract, so I'll say, okay, so what we're doing here is we're exploring your relationship with your brother. And I get a yes from the client. If they say no, it's really about something else, then we clarify, and then I say what we're focusing here is on your relationship with your boss. And they say yes. Now we've got a contract. Then in my mind, I'm going to choose a pathway. But before I take the client onto the pathway, Sam, I'm going to ask her if she'd like to try something. So I might say, that might look like this. I might say, I have an idea that the way we could do this is to look at the relationship with your boss from different perspectives, different viewpoints. How does that sound? And I get a yes or no. And let's say I get a yes. Now I've got permission to do expanding the view.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think especially clarifying was you saying that sometimes it has to be renegotiated. Because I think
yeah.
my intentions can be really good, but then sometimes it just, the work in progress.
We want to come back to the word trust that was raised a moment ago. So I'm going to say something about trust because I think it's absolutely key. Think of the coaching relationship as having 4 cornerstones. The first, of course, is love. And love means connection. And so we want to open a connection both to ourselves and to our clients. We want to be in an open-hearted, compassionate relationship. We want to be present and a loving witness. So love is the first cornerstone. The second is trust. And here's what I mean by trust. Trust means trusting that you are self, and that by accessing self, you're actually bringing value into the coaching session. It also means trusting that your client is self. That no matter what the story, they are wise, whole, loving, and good. Trusting that. Trust also means trusting the coaching process, and particularly the 5 pathways. And for those of you who this makes sense to, for me, it also means trusting the divine, that the whole thing is being held. And if I'm patient, I can be of service. And then there's truth. It's important to be truthful with ourselves and with our clients. And the fourth cornerstone may surprise you. It's play. If we lose access to play, we've probably lost access to that critical mass of self. Self is playful. So you can do deep and challenging work and still have access to play. So I'm going to move over to Paulina and see what her question is.
Yes, I like what you said a bit earlier about being the pathway being the river, and oftentimes there are landmarks, and it is our job to kind of pull the client back to the river, and that happens to me a lot where there's lots of, you know, sidestepping to other stories and parts perhaps. Can you tell us a little bit more about bringing the client back to the pathway?
Yeah. I'll just interrupt and say, you know, that sounds important. Could we put it aside for now and come back to, let's say we're using experiencing the moment, come back to what's happening inside you? What are you noticing inside you right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I could do that with any of the pathways. I'm transparent about what I'm doing.
Right. It's that truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want it. That's the third cornerstone, truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna do now is talk about each of the pathways. So each pathway is distinctive. And what I've done is identified the core idea, the root question, and the distinctive methodology. And I'm going to point those out to you for each of the 5. And I want to remind you that each, though they are different, ultimately leads to the same destination, which is greater access to self. And greater access to self means expanded awareness, deeper self-acceptance, which ultimately leads to conscious choice and creative action, which is what we want for our clients and what they want for themselves. So let's start with exploring needs and values. The core idea of this pathway, exploring needs and values, is that everything we say or do is an attempt to meet a need or honor a value. Everything we say or do is an attempt to meet a need or honor a value. And that idea is tremendously helpful to me when I can remember it, that outside of coaching, when I'm encountering people who are engaging in difficult behavior, is to realize they're actually trying to meet a need. It may not be the most skillful way to do it, but they're trying to meet a need. And it's also a way that I can bring some compassion to myself when I've been unskillful and I stop and I go, oh, I was trying to meet a need and I really didn't do it very well. And here's what I can learn. But I want to bring as much self-compassion as possible. So the core idea is everything we say or do is an attempt to meet a need or honor a value. And the root question here is, what's at stake? What matters most in this situation? So going back to that idea of having a conversation with a boss, it's like digging down what's really at stake here. And what may be at stake here is claiming one's own power when talking to someone who ranks higher in one environment. How can I claim my power when I go talk to the person who is in charge of what I do and how much I get paid? So you can see it's not just about the conversation, it's just not just about workload or paycheck. It's actually about standing up for myself in what has been up until now a challenging situation. So we can ask various questions to dig down to the deeper need or the value and say, okay, if you were able to say those things, what would you get? And if you got that, what would you get? You keep going down to the next layer underneath. So the methodology of exploring needs and values is to help the client find and feel the poignancy, the yearning of the unmet need or the unhonored value. So we're looking for the unmet need and feeling the poignancy of it not being met. Can we be with that? When do you use this pathway? When our clients are putting other people's needs or values first. When they're complaining or irritable. So if I walk into a restaurant with a couple of people and I say, wow, it's so noisy in here, you would think they would do something. That noise, it makes it hard to talk. So I have a need for peace and quiet, and the better way to handle that is to go to the waiter and say, any chance you could turn the music down? So then I'm honoring it directly. But the irritability is the tip-off that something that I need or want is not being honored. Digging for the deeper need is also a way to find the deeper agenda. So that's exploring needs and values. Let's go to experiencing the moment. The core idea of experiencing the moment is acceptance. We might even say self-acceptance. The present moment is the doorway to freedom, joy, peace, and love. This moment, being fully present to how I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing in this moment. Experiencing the moment is a kind of facilitated mindfulness. The root question here is, what's happening inside right now? What's happening inside right now? What's true for you in this moment? Or just to use the title of the pathway itself, what is your experience in this moment? So it's a kind of facilitated, friendly attending. You want to bring curiosity and compassion to what's happening inside. So the methodology is to explore current experience until a shift occurs. To explore current experience until a shift occurs. To bring friendly attending to the internal world until a shift occurs. And sometimes a person will start, at one level, and then they'll actually go down a level of resonance. They'll go into even deeper distress before they come up to a place of higher resonance and less distress. But trust the pathway. Just follow it wherever it leads. And what are you experiencing now? And when you pay attention to that, what happens? And if you continue to stay with it, what are you noticing? You just keep bringing them back to that experience and help them to track it curiously and compassionately. When do we use experiencing the moment? When you notice that a client is pushing something away, that they're resisting feelings or emotions, that there's flat affect, that there's no emotion, or that there's strong emotion, that would also be a time. And the cool thing about experiencing the moment is that the skills can help you with all the other pathways. It can help you take a client deeper on all the other pathways. So that's experiencing the moment. Let us move to envisioning the future. The core idea here is awakening. A fulfilling life is a life of passion and purpose, a life of meaning and mission, a life of values and vision. A fulfilling life begins now. The path is the destination. There was a second century Christian bishop who said, "The glory of God is the human person fully alive." The glory of God is the human person fully alive. That's what we want for our clients, to bring them fully alive, to wake them up. And envisioning the future is a way of doing that, of awakening. So the root question here is, what brings you alive? What brings you alive? Another way to ask that is, what wakes you up? Or what is your vision of the best possible future? What's your vision of the best possible future? And so the methodology, the way we actually do the path, the method for doing it, is to find the vision and set a goal that leads to the vision. So you find the vision, and then you find a path. And then the next step would be, and what's the first step on that path? What's the natural first step? When do you use envisioning the future? Well, the beginning of a coaching relationship is a good time to help them envision what they're looking for. When a client wants a new life or more out of life, it's to help them envision the future. Or they're yearning to contribute or make a difference. So what's the world they want to give birth to? What's the world you want to give birth to? What is the vision for your coaching practice? So that's envisioning the future. Let's go to expanding the view. The core idea for expanding the view is freedom. We are always in a viewpoint, and we can choose another viewpoint. We have more freedom than we realize. We are always in a viewpoint, and we can choose another viewpoint. We are always at choice in how we respond to our circumstances. This is the worst thing that ever happened to me. This is an opportunity for growth. Actually, this is delaying me from doing something that probably wouldn't be good for me. You know, you can keep generating different perspectives. So the core idea is freedom, freedom of choice. It's about choice. It's noticing that we're in one perspective, and when we realize that, when we become self-conscious that we're actually in a perspective, in a viewpoint, we can go, oh, what would be another way of looking at this? So that is the root question. What's another way of looking at that? Byron Katie has a couple of powerful questions that she uses that serve a similar purpose. One of her questions is, so you've got some disempowering thought, and she'll say, who would you be without that thought? Who would you be without that thought? So the methodology of expanding the view is to explore multiple viewpoints and then choose one from which to create. So a tip, you need at least 3 viewpoints. Otherwise, you've got a dilemma. So you want at least 3 viewpoints. So explore multiple viewpoints and then choose one from which to create. So when you use expanding the view, so when you notice that your client is stuck in a limiting viewpoint, where they have a decision to make, they can look at it from multiple perspectives. When they're in a place of overwhelm, or when you hear competing voices, so each voice would get its own place on the viewpoints grid. So that is expanding the view. And now we come to embracing the shadow, or what I normally refer to as parts work. The core idea here is what's in the way is the way. What's in the way is the way. So the root question is, what's in the way? Or who inside you objects to your doing what you want to do? So the methodology here is to find the positive intention in the part that is blocking transformation. The intention is positive, regardless of the appearances. When do you use this? I use it all the time. It's my go-to pathway. And I say that, but you want to master all the pathways. And this is the hardest one to master. So you want to master the first four, absolutely. They are part of your bread and butter. But when you use this, when you hear a limiting belief, when you hear a strong voice or multiple voices, you can say, oh, so there's a part of you, we'll stick with the same example, there's a part of you that wants to go talk to your boss, and I hear another part that's a little hesitant about that. What if we talk to one or both? And they say yes. You say, okay, which one do you want to talk to first? And now you've got permission. And if they get off track, you can say, yeah, that sounds interesting, but let's come back to that part that's concerned about your going in, since we agreed that was the part we were going to talk to. So, those are the 5 pathways. I'm going to pause and see what questions you have. Any questions? Jody.
I actually, is it okay to mix parts work with what's going on, feeling in the moment, experiencing the moment, and then put a whole pile? I guess I blend the pathways.
Yeah.
You said use that cautiously.
Yes.
The danger of that.
So the 2 you just cited is something I do all the time.
Okay.
I'll start with experiencing the moment, and that helps them actually get into a part. And then I move into parts work. So I might get them into contact with something that's going on, say in their chest.
Mm-hmm.
And we explore that a little. And then I might say, how about if we actually talk to that part? So I get permission. If they say yes, they say, okay, great. And then at that point, I might say, invite that part to come out to a conversational distance so we can get to know and understand it from its perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could get into the business of befriending that part. Yeah.
That's right.
So I find those 2 pathways, in fact, Jody, work very neatly together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I find as well.
Yeah. I think we've made a similar discovery. Any other questions? Ratna Devi.
Let me just unmute, start my video as well, so you can hopefully see me.
I can see you.
Yeah, I've blended myself off that screen though for similar reasons. I don't want to just keep looking, well, how do I look and so on, you know. Anyway, I tend to also go with experiencing the moment and maybe envisioning the future to some extent, but parts work a lot. But I would actually like to have more sort of, I find some of the other pathways sound really fun and playful, whereas the parts work can just be a little bit sort of go to the really meaty, heavy stuff, you know, even if the outcome is like, you know, okay, yes, big self and so on. And I think one of the reasons why I tend to get stuck somewhere, or the clients often get stuck, because they value authenticity. And some of these kind of, okay, let's just choose another viewpoint or just envision the future, they don't trust quite themselves that what they come up with is actually of any value or, you know, means anything. I wonder if that's something you have come across.
So we want to pay attention to our own parts. I have found that parts work can be enormously playful, and that it helps facilitate it. And I would say to the client who wants to be authentic, I'll say there are many sides, many aspects to you. How about if we explore some that, if we're expanding the view, how about if we explore some that you normally don't tap into? Would you be open to that adventure? Because there's many ways of being authentic. So let me give you an example from my own life as a coach, is that there are days when I may be tired and I'm just not feeling good about what I'm doing. And I come into the coaching session and they say, "How are you?" And I go, "You know, I'm pretty good." And in that moment, I've tapped into that pretty good place. And that allows me to come into that and be that. And even model playfulness when before the session started, I wasn't able to. Am I being inauthentic? Or am I tapping into other resources inside?
Yes, I would agree with you very much so, but I'm thinking more from the point of view of the client who doesn't quite maybe know themselves quite in that way and doesn't even quite know where to look or how to trust these images that might be just somewhere there turning up in the outer parameter of their inner vision.
So what I find is that requires patience and persistence. So self with a capital S has 5 qualities that begin with the letter P. And there is patience, persistence, perspective, presence, and play. And these are particularly important for the coach. And so, yes, I think I hear what you're saying, Ratna Devi. There are people who have yet to get comfortable really going inside. And so we need to be very patient and persistent as we look for the little cracks of daylight that we can invite to open slowly. I find gentleness with patience makes a difference. because they have parts. They have parts that are naturally reluctant to go in because it hasn't been a pleasant experience in the past. So in a sense, even if we're not working directly with the parts, we're working indirectly with them. We're building credibility with them. Is it safe to let Guthrie see inside? Does that help, Rhonda Davy?
It does help to some extent. Yes, I like your 5 Ps. Do you have 5 Es as well? But I'm wondering, what came to my mind is sort of like encouragement. Somehow, how can I encourage the client to believe that these little flickers of imagination have some meaning, that they can really trust it? Because I think people are, in my experience, easier to come to, you know, reveal something that they're feeling in their body.
Yes.
Rather than what the imagination offers to them.
It's easier for them to look in the body.
Yeah.
I just invite them there.
Uh-huh.
Many people don't get some people don't get images. That's fine. Just use what does come to them.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our job is to sell our clients on the possibility of change.
Uh-huh.
And that we can do it in a way that is deeply respectful and organic.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah. So we're salespeople in part.
Mm-hmm.
We're merchants of hope, as one of my mentors, Richard Schwartz, says. Are there any other hands? Okay. Well, we've still got some time. I'm gonna offer you some other teaching. If you're not overloaded. I do like being able to see you. So I want to say something about the implications of self for you, the coach. You want to coach from a critical mass of self. That is, you want access to the 8 C's. You want access to the 5 P's. For me, playfulness is key. If I don't have access to playfulness, I know I need to go inside and create more space. If it's getting grim, I need to reset. There's a part of me that's gotten really attached to outcome or giving value or something like that. And I need to go inside, acknowledge that part, connect with it, and ask it with great respect if it would be willing to step back and let me handle this. So when you, the coach, have a critical mass of self, you are able to be fully present to yourself and to your clients. This is actually what allows you to do what CFT calls transformational listening. So you can think of, there's 3 levels of listening. There's listening to your client, being completely focused on your client and you hear nothing else. Second level, or another way of hearing, let's not call them levels, let's call them ways of hearing. Another way of hearing is to go inside and notice what's going on. And that's what we're encouraging our clients to do, is to begin listening internally. Transformational listening, you're doing both, but not in a multitasking way. Multitasking is just switching back and forth quickly between two different modes. Switching between talking to you and checking for email, for example. But transformational listening, another way I think of it is it's expanded listening. Expanded listening comes when you've got a critical mass of self. It allows you to be present for what's happening inside you and fully connected to your client. That's what presence is. That is a deep witnessing state. You're tracking your client and you can see the impact on you. And you're receiving information from inside. You may also notice that you have a voice that's saying, oh, we've only got 10 minutes, or and starts thinking of questions to ask in a minute or two. So when you're in an expanded place, you can just notice those voices and you don't have to hand them the microphone. You don't have to blend with them. You just I hear you. 10 minutes is a lot of time. Amazing things can happen in 10 minutes. And coaching happens between sessions. So when you have a critical mass of self, you're able to be fully present to yourself and to your clients. And both are necessary. Self-awareness and awareness of the client. This expanded awareness opens you to transformational listening. So how do you get a critical mass of self? And then I'm gonna answer that question, and then I'm gonna go to Reggie. So how do you get a critical mass of self? The long-term answer is you have a regular spiritual practice. You have a daily practice that allows you to come to stillness and spaciousness. Short term, you ground and center yourself before a session so that you can have access to your natural calmness, clarity, and confidence. So before a session, get grounded. See who's there. Ask them respectfully to step back. In the moment, like during a coaching session, this is self-management, open to curiosity. Put aside your judgment and ask yourself, I wonder what is trying to emerge in my client. My client, in his or her brilliance, has conspired with other people to set up these exact circumstances for his or her growth. Wow. Let's get curious about that. Another way I do it is open to compassion. Let your heart be touched by your client. Let your heart connect to your client. So, self-management. In a word, self-management is to notice and recover. And there's no faster way to recover than to be kind to yourself. In fact, if you take nothing away from this teleclass, other than the message that self-compassion is key to your growth as a coach, you will have taken away the heart of my message. And then practice. And let's go see what Reggie's got for us. Reggie.
Can you hear me?
Just lost you. Now I can hear you.
Okay. Maybe this great session so far. I really, really am enjoying this. Maybe my question is, like, got a part of me that's blocking. They're just kind of stuck today. But in the 5 Ps, you talked about persistence.
Yeah.
And I was trying to track on that, and I'm just kind of getting foggy there. So I wondered if you could say more about that.
Yeah. So let's say I was working with you, Reggie, and we were doing let's say we were doing parts work. And we agreed that we were going to work on the part of you that criticizes you. And each time I go to work with that, another part comes in that wants to explain things or wants to be nice. And so I just very patiently say, Reggie, would you ask that other part just to step back? And I might ask you to do that 10 times.
Okay. All right, I get it. Yep. That's kind of what I was thinking about. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but also experiencing the moment. You know, let's say I was working with you again and I say, oh, what's that like inside? And you say, well, there's this thing that happened. I say, Reggie, what happened if you come back to the area between your chin and your seat? What do you notice? And I'm patient and persistent. Because you never want to communicate to your client that they're doing anything wrong, because they're not. That's a fact. They are not doing anything wrong. They're just taking care of themselves. And so what we're doing is we're actually letting the client teach us how to coach them. Yeah. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Jody.
It has to do with that. Are you late? Because I hear you asking them to step back, and do you say that we can address them later, if that's something, and do you label them as this is another part of you, or this is another voice I'm hearing?
Yeah. So if you're doing parts work, Jody, and you've agreed to work with, say, what we'll call the target part. And let's say the target part holds a lot of rage. Mm-hmm. This would be a good example. And you're trying to talk to that part, but a part that is concerned that the part with rage will take over the whole system keeps coming in. Mm-hmm. So you ask it to step back, and maybe it steps back for a moment and then it comes back. Mm-hmm. And so then you might ask it about its concerns, and it voices them, and you say, okay, I hear the concerns. Will you step back now? And they say yes, and they step back. But they come in a third time. Mm-hmm. At this point, I would say to the part with the rage, I would say, you know what? We're going to talk to this other part for now. That other part now becomes the target part. Mm-hmm.
That's what
and you work with that part, and you come back to the rage another time. So that's an example of patience and persistence and shifting the focus as the system requests. So the protective system was requesting a shift in focus, and we honored that request.
Thank you. That was exactly what I was asking.
Okay, cool. Okay. I'm going to give you a little more teaching, and then we'll see if there's any questions, and then we'll wrap up. But first, I need to give myself a little more water. So, what are the implications of self with a capital S for the coaching process? Here's my claim. The goal of all coaching is to open your client's access to self. So in other words, everything you do, all the skills, all the pathways, even if you decide to share something from your own life, all of that is in service, if it's true coaching, to opening your client's access to self, so that the client can gain entry into that treasure house of calm, clarity, confidence, curiosity, compassion, creativity, connectedness, and courage. Self is the natural leader of the internal world. So essentially what we're after is self-leadership. Self is the natural leader of the internal world. And the parts actually want that to happen. They just haven't had any experience of it, and so they're scared. Self holds the big picture. It knows what to do even in challenging circumstances. It facilitates healing, harmony, balance, and ultimately transformation. This is why we emphasize coaching the client, not the problem. The client's core self knows the answers or where to find the answers. We don't have to do it. This is a great relief for us. We do not need to figure it out. We just choose a pathway and we facilitate them along that pathway. Ultimately, the pathway empties into it's a river that empties into the ocean of self. The client will know what to do. So coach the client, not the problem. As clients change, their view of their circumstances changes, and they know what to do. So as I've been saying, we don't need to figure it out. We trust the client. We trust the client's innate wholeness, their innate wisdom. And we trust the coaching process will open that for them. So many new coaches work too hard. If I find myself really stressing, it's because I've lost faith in the client or the process. I've lost faith in something and I need to reset. Yeah. Questions, comments? Ratna Devi.
I was struck by one sentence. Let the client teach you how to coach them. And I wonder whether you could unpack that a little bit more, because I can just see like a scenario you were describing earlier where, you know, we have chosen a pathway, maybe it's parts work and we want to just go with, work with this particular part, but the client just talks about other things, you know, keeps coming back to the actual practical situation, say, you know. So what does that mean, let the client teach you? Does it mean to be more persistent, or does it mean taking your clues to maybe other things are more important?
Let me think about that a moment and try and answer that the more specific question that you had, which was let me see if I can remember it. When the client keeps bringing you back to their particular circumstances.
Yeah.
So I would go into salesmanship or saleswomanship, depending on my gender identity at the time. And I would say, I've got an idea that if we do this process, at the end of it, you're going to know what to do about these circumstances. Are you willing to try the experiment? Mm-hmm. And if it becomes clear they're not willing to try the experiment, that they keep taking us off, I'll say, okay, it seems like you just wanted that right now, you just want to deal with these particular circumstances. You don't have a job, you need a resume. Let's brainstorm around accomplishing those goals. Mm-hmm. So what practical steps would you like us to address in this session? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I would just let them bring it down to the granular level if that's what they seem to be desperate for. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it does. It's sort of something to do with where the client is at in terms of their self-awareness, isn't it? If you're just pushing for a sort of deeper level of self-knowledge and realization, and they just can't quite do it, maybe they can't do it for a short period of time, but then they lack the sort of focus, maybe.
Yeah.
Then there is no point in trying to persevere, I guess, because it just becomes all a bit sort of tense or, yeah.
So you want to find a balance, Ratna Devi. We don't want to sell our clients short. Mm-hmm. Remember, they are naturally creative, resourceful, whole, wise, loving, and good. Mm-hmm. And we need to meet them where they are, not where we wish they were.
Yes.
So it's always adjusting that balance. And sometimes I get that balance wrong and I have to readjust.
Yeah. I think that's where patience comes in. I do like your piece, I have to say. I think. Yes, I guess that's where patience comes in.
Yeah. So I want to give credit to Dick Schwartz. I got the 5 Ps from him.
Yeah. Because I guess then compassion can come in as well, opening the heart to the fact that they are at the level where they are at, with all the suffering that involves and so on.
If we just meet our clients
mm-hmm.
with an open heart, we have given them something they probably rarely get.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Ratna Devi. So let's go to Jody.
As she was talking, and both of you were talking, and I was thinking, well, if I was in that situation, what would I do? I might, and I'm not sure, so I want some feedback. Ask about, what's in the way, what are the obstacles that, and sort of, and I go back to what you had just said before, what's in the way is the way. So I would probably go into that avenue and see where that led.
Yeah, that would probably be one of the first things I would try too.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming. Your presence actually made this what it is. So, Jackie, could you open the microphones and we can all say goodbye to each other. So, Jody, Reggie, Jesse, Liza, Paulina, Ratna Devi, Win, Sam, and the person using Vikram's account. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Guthrie.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Looking
Nice.
forward to next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.